thank you so much for your time. Today we are talking about damage types. There are so many in this game that, again, the goal here is to simplify the best we can. I think the way to do that is going to be just quickly kind of scrolling through some of the damage types. So, let's look at all damage. I think that's probably one of the better starting points here. So all damage is just adding damage from anything you're doing damage to. So that's the way to look at it. That is a damage type. It's not just damage, right? Damage is damage you'd think at first. But there's physical damage, there's elemental damage, for example, damage with poison, damage with bleeding, damage with poisoning. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a little off, things are kind of weird, but it's something to be mindful for. So if you have a poison build, being mindful of all damage, damage with poison, damage with poisoning, things to keep in mind. Damage versus poisoned. So if they're already poisoned, the damage you do to them after the fact. So that's just one element, a way to look at damage types. It gets kind of crazy after a while. There's a ton of different ways you can add to damage and different ways to think about it. Some builds don't necessarily benefit from certain damage types. I don't really overpower, but I have a ton of overpower damage. So, could I work it in somehow? Maybe, but because I'm doing so much other, I'm doing a damage type that doesn't really take in overpower, it doesn't, I'm going to have to switch everything, it just doesn't make any sense. So the idea is there. It can be a lot at first to take in, so just be careful. Just because you can add to it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do more damage. But real quick, damage types, there are a bunch of them. They can overlap, you can double dip. Some you can, some you can't. So just be mindful of that. If you really start hitting a point in the game where you're really, really manipulating these numbers and stacking damage types, you'll probably have a better head on your shoulder than most players then. But for some of the newer players who might be watching this, it can get really confusing really fast. So again, another real quick, damage types, there's a lot of them. Stack the damage types that make the most sense for your build. If you don't know what that means, just go for the most simple damage types that you can. All damage, damage while, let's say, versus close, versus distance, if damage while healthy. I say these are the simple ones because if you're close to someone, that makes sense. If you are a damage dealer that isn't close to people, maybe adding to this wouldn't make sense for you. If there's a damage versus distant enemies, I would suggest that. The idea is there where once you start adding to a little more than just damage you do, and you really want to start getting kind of crazy, then you can dig into it really quick. This is going to be a longer video, I'm sorry. It's one of the ranty ones. I apologize. Damage types are kind of tricky in this game. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for letting me rant, and we'll talk soon.